Well, amid a pause in U.S. funding to the World Health Organization, there are new accusations that the WHO is trafficking Cuban doctors being sent around the world with little to no pay and possibly against their will. Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody is working on the issue, joins us now live. Attorney General, good to have you with us.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so the allegation is that Cuban doctors are being sent around the world to work in different places. The Miami Herald had a very interesting take on this. They did a piece that is essentially, this is the title: "Despite U.S. warnings, Cuba's medical diplomacy triumphs in the Caribbean during pandemic." They say the political message is clear. Observers of this region there in the Caribbean say, contrary to what the U.S. has been trying to demonstrate by having the doctors chased out of Brazil, Bolivia, and other Latin American nations, Cuba's medical brigades are still needed and appreciated. So, what's the problem?
These Cuban medical missions, if you'll call them, are really just disguised human trafficking. These doctors are coerced into going overseas, working on behalf of Cuba. In fact, the money that is funneled back into Cuba from this trafficking makes up half of their total budget. This is no small operation, and the sad part about it is that the arm of the WHO, the Pan American Health Organization, has been overseeing, managing, funneling this money back to Cuba on the backs of these Cuban doctors that are pushed out into these other countries.
So, as part of that Miami Herald article, they quoted the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Gaston Brown, saying, "We find it astonishing that this program, which has helped to deliver good health care services to our people, is conveniently characterized by others as human trafficking." I mean, how do we know what these doctors are experiencing? Is there any way for us to know accurately whether they're willingly there or not, what they're being paid, what they aren't being paid?
Well, I can tell you about 1,500 of these medical professionals now live in South Florida, where I'm the Attorney General. And as the Attorney General, I lead up our efforts against human trafficking, which is a modern-day slavery. And these Cuban doctors say they were separated from their families. They were not allowed to use normal passports. In fact, they could only go back to Cuba and Brazil. They could only go back one time a year. They had minders or advisors that monitored their every movement. And they got a pittance of money, just a small fraction. It all went through the Pan American Health Organization straight to the Cuban regime.
So how does the WHO answer these allegations? Have they been transparent? Are they providing you information?
Well, I'll tell you what, when this carefully crafted, I believe, criminal scheme was set up, the Pan American Health Organization said, we'll take the money. That way the Brazilian Congress won't know, and it goes back to the Cuban government. And while the Brazilian auditors have asked repeatedly, year after year, for documentation, they have not handed this over. You know, these organizations, they operate under an immunity, and they have to be carefully scrutinized and repeatedly monitored. And that's why I agree with President Trump's action to withhold funding while we investigate whether or not these organizations are truly acting in accordance with their intended mission, and that is to represent all member states.
Okay, I want to ask you quickly before we let you go, because we know Florida is one of the states that's been struggling with releasing some inmates or people who are awaiting trial because of worries about COVID spreading through detention facilities. In Florida, they say Joseph Williams, in one case, was in jail on charges of possession of heroin, a third-degree felony, and possession of drug paraphernalia, a first-degree misdemeanor. The 26-year-old was one of 100 inmates given bond as part of an effort to lower the risk of COVID spreading. Now sheriff's officials say he was arrested for a murder that took place March 20th along Ash Avenue in Tampa's Progress Village neighborhood that allegedly happened the day after he was released. I mean, how can we manage this better?
It's a tragic, horrible situation. You know, I see the pressures on our detention facilities, and they're trying to manage the safety of not only the inmates, but staff members. We cannot take our eye off the ball of the safety of our public, especially during a time of emergency, during a time of crisis. we have to make sure that these defendants are looked at individually, and we know their background, we know how many times they've been arrested, whether that involved firearms, whether they're going to be a danger to the public. This can serve as a cautionary tale, a reminder that we cannot take our eye off the ball as others are considering this across the nation.
Yeah, and we're getting word tonight that in Washington state, they're preparing to release maybe up to 1,000 more. All right, Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody, good to have you with us.
Thank you.